And I'm gonna keep this spoiler free because if you haven't played this yet, you deserve to experience it fresh. So the story of Last Light picks up about a year after the events of the first game, Metro 2033. And for those unfamiliar with the premise, the world actually ended in a nuclear annihilation in 2013. The survivors in Moscow fled into the subway system, establishing makeshift societies within those metro stations. And the surface is an irradiated nightmare completely overrun by horrific mutants, and the air is highly toxic. You play as Artyom, who has now been promoted to a ranger in the Spartan Order, an elite faction dedicated to protecting the remnants of humanity. The setup for Last Light revolves around the fallout of Artyom's actions at the end of the first game, and now he's ordered by his commander Miller to head to the surface to eliminate the last surviving Dark One, a mysterious mutant species that Artyom had supposedly wiped out in the first game. But things go horribly wrong, chaos ensues, and Artyom ends up getting dragged across the entire metro system, getting tangled up in a political war. You see, humanity didn't learn a damn thing from destroying the planet. The Metro is divided into several ideological factions. You have the Communist Red Line, the neo-Nazi Fourth Reich, and the capitalist trade consortium known as Hansa. They're all vying for control of D6, a pre-war military bunker that holds enough weapons and supplies to take over the entire underground.
Hey man, spare a bullet, eh? You got plenty.
The world building here is second to none. Walking through neutral stations like Bolshoi or Venice is a treat. 4A games absolutely nailed the environmental storytelling. You can stand in a dimly lit bar and just listen to NPCs talk for minutes on end. You hear people complaining about the lack of food, soldiers swapping terrifying ghost stories about shadows in the tunnels, and children asking their parents what the sky used to look like. It creates an atmosphere that's often devoid of humor or anything remotely lighthearted. It's quite depressing at times, painting an eerie picture of what humanity might have to resort to if we ever actually faced a nuclear apocalypse. Next up, the visuals, graphics, and the art style. Okay, this is crazy, but it's 2026 and Last Light Redux still looks better than some of the AAA titles that came out in the last few years. That's not hyperbole, that's just a testament to the raw power of the 4A engine. When it comes to atmospheric rendering, 4A games were wizards. The lighting is the true star of the show here. Because you spend so much time in the pitch-black tunnels of the subway, light is incredibly precious. The engine handles global illumination, dynamic shadows, and volumetric fog with a level of sophistication that was years ahead of its time. The blinding glare of a guard's flashlight piercing through a dusty corridor, the warm, comforting glow of a makeshift campfire in a refugee camp, and the bioluminescence of radioactive moss on the surface, it all culminates into a visual identity that is completely unique. The game also heavily utilizes physics and supersample anti-aliasing, or SSAA, which absolutely melted PC hardware back in 2014, but runs like a dream on modern rigs. Now, there's a bit of a debate regarding the art style shift from the original to the Redux version. Some argue that the Redux actually hurt the game's atmosphere by making the lighting a little too bright, too polished, and too shiny for a post-apocalyptic setting. While I can see where they're coming from, I personally think the Redux looks pretty freaking good. The texture work, the rusting metal of the makeshift train cars, and the fleshy details on the mutant models still hold up. But what really cements the visual immersion is its commitment to a diegetic UI. You don't have a mini-map or an objective marker holding your hand. If you need to know where to go, Artyom physically pulls out a clipboard with a compass attached to it. And when you're on the surface, the air is toxic, so you have to wear a gas mask. You have to physically monitor the time remaining on your air filter by looking at the digital watch on your wrist. And my favorite mechanic? When your gas mask gets covered in mud or mutant blood, you gotta physically wipe the visor clean. It's such a tiny detail, but it grounds you in the world so effectively that you genuinely feel claustrophobic. It is immersion done right, plain and simple. Alright, let's get into the nitty-gritty, the gameplay. Every Metro game blends survival horror, stealth, and shooting almost perfectly. But the gunplay here is a massive step up from the original 2033. It's snappy, responsive, and packs a serious punch. The weapons in the Metro universe aren't your standard military firearms. They're mostly makeshift, scrapped-together tools of survival. Like the Bastard, an SMG made out of spare parts that overheats and jams constantly. Then there's the Shambler, a revolving shotgun that requires you to load each shell manually, which is pretty terrifying when you're being swarmed by mutants. And then you've the pneumatic weapons like the T-Car sniper rifle and the Helsing. And weapon customization really opens up your tactical options. You can slap on silencers, extended mags, night vision scopes, laser sights, and a few more things. And what's interesting here is how the game handles the economy, the currency. In Metro, pre-war military-grade bullets are literally money. You can also use these pristine, high-damage bullets into your guns, but doing so means you're literally shooting away your cash. It's a brilliant concept that forces you to constantly weigh the financial cost of survival against the immediate threat of death. Do you dump your life savings into a mutant to survive, or do you try to make do with your homemade ammo? Now I'll say on standard difficulties, the game throws so much loot at you that the economy never really feels that oppressive. You can basically hoard your military bullets, pick one good suppressed weapon early on, and use it for about 75% of the entire campaign, which is why I recommend everyone to play it on a harder difficulty. So what about stealth? Well, stealth is arguably the most satisfying way to play this game. Sneaking through heavily fortified Nazi outposts or red line camps feels incredible. You've a blue light indicator on your watch. If it glows, you're visible, and if it's dark, you're a ghost. You can unscrew light bulbs, blow out lanterns, and shoot out spotlights to create your own paths through the darkness. You can also do stealth takedowns, like either lethally stab a guard or non-lethally knock them out, making the stealth far more forgiving but fluid. However, the enemy AI can sometimes break the immersion. While they're usually competent, occasionally you'll see enemies run directly at you and then just stand completely still for a few seconds. The AI is definitely the weakest link in the combat loop, but the stellar atmosphere mostly makes up for it. Now let's talk about the most misunderstood and controversial mechanic in the entire Metro franchise, the hidden morality system. This is like karma, and it ultimately dictates which of the game's two endings you get. You can either get the standard tragic ending or the hidden, highly sought after redemption ending. But unlike modern RPGs which kinda tell you press A to be good, press B to be evil, Last Light tracks your morality invisibly. I usually never get a good ending in this game. To get the good ending, you need like 100 plus moral points out of 200, I believe. Yes, sparing major antagonists is required, but you also have to actively engage with the world. You get moral points for exploring hidden areas, finding secret ranger caches, and interacting with the environment. You like literally get points for strumming a guitar you find in a dark corner, or giving a military-grade bullet to a homeless beggar in a station. You earn points for returning a crying child's lost teddy in Venice, and for standing completely still in the shadows for 5 minutes just to listen to the entirety of an enemy's conversation before you sneak past them. The game rewards restraint against mutants too. Like if you see a demon feasting on a corpse, and you sneak past it instead of shooting, you get a point. And to be honest, I don't have the patience for any of that, which is why I never get the good ending. But I always get a good ending in Metro Exodus though. For a strictly linear single-player shooter, it offers a pretty solid chunk of content. If you're just blasting your way through the main campaign on normal difficulty, checking out a few side rooms, and not worrying too much about stealth, the game will probably take you around 10 hours to roll the credits. However, if you're a completionist and you're meticulously searching every nook and cranny for diary pages, trying to open every single safe, sneaking through every encounter without killing anyone, and listening to every piece of NPC dialogue to farm those moral points, it can easily take you upwards of 20 hours. The difficulty curve is actually very well paced. The game slowly introduces more heavily armored soldiers, snipers, and deadlier packs of mutants as you progress. The stealth sections are generally pretty forgiving on standard difficulties, mostly because the enemies have somewhat limited peripheral vision. But the game does feature some intense difficulty spikes during scripted ambushes. In these moments, the game strips away your ability to hide and tests your pure combat reflexes. Okay, let's talk about performance, because looking at the official system requirements for this game today is pretty interesting. Back in 2014, the Metro franchise was the gold standard for PC benchmarking. It was the game you used to prove to your friends that your expensive new graphics card wasn't a waste of money. But today, you could probably run this game on a smart fridge. Even the recommended specs are a blast from the past. You need a quad-core or a beefy dual-core processor, 4GB of RAM, and a DirectX 11 GPU like the legendary GTX 480. And if you wanted the absolute bleeding-edge experience back then, like trying to run it with NVIDIA 3D Vision, remember when 3D gaming was a thing? You needed a Core i7, 8GB of RAM, and a GTX 690. Playing this on a modern rig is just flawless, and it's incredibly well optimized. Load times are virtually non-existent on an SSD, and you can crank the SSAA to the maximum to get the crispest image quality imaginable. It's incredibly accessible for any level of hardware today. So why is it consistently labeled as an underrated gem by everyone? Well, it mostly comes down to the game that followed it. When Metro Exodus dropped in 2019, it achieved mainstream success by abandoning the claustrophobic tunnels for open-world regions. It brought in millions of new fans. But if you look at the veteran community, a massive chunk of them will fiercely argue that Last Light is actually the best game in the entire trilogy. And I'm one of them because it's just a fact. The atmosphere here isn't welcoming, it's hostile, restrictive, and forces you to make compromises. And it's actually the perfect middle child because it fixed the clunky mechanics of the original 2033, but retained the linear focus that Exodus left behind. If you missed out on this game back in the day, do yourself a favor, grab it on a Steam sale for dirt cheap, and dive into the Metro. You won't regret it.